The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello and welcome to Gone by Lunchtime, the Spinoff's politics podcast. Piki mai, kake mai. With me today in the Spinoff studio, we have Ben Thomas of Exceltium Communications, which sounds a little bit like what a sort of company that a Batman villain might run.
Sort of, yeah, kind of everything from ballistic missiles to like school lunches made with seaweed or something.
Excellent. Are those some of the companies you're representing at the moment?
I think it comes from a Latin root. You'd have to ask Managing Director and classics scholar Matthew Hooton. Annabelle
Lee is with us as well, the executive producer of The Hui, which is how far into that season are you now?
Halfway. We just got an extension of 5 more episodes, so we're officially halfway now.
And how many episodes in a row are you now that you've asked Paula Bennett to come on the show and she's politely declined?
9.
That's pretty good going. Today we're going to talk about a bunch of things. It's been a quiet time. We've had a recess for, it seems like, forever. How many, sort of 4 weeks? Have you guys been sort of desperately missing the opportunity to tune into Parliament TV and watch the rowing?
It freezes New Zealand politics in amber, doesn't it? It's sort of this eternal present. Where there's no kind of progress on any issues, so we just have to go back to sort of 3.5 weeks of mulling over the Labour Party's standing as a possible next government. It's a depressing time.
Annabelle, does it make a difference when you're producing a weekly politics program to have Parliament away?
Not really.
Not really. Good. Among the various things that have been going on, all the same, are the kind of Auckland's unitary plan being reported back by the independent hearings panel, as well as the Māori Party have been in the news a fair bit, both by announcing that they won't be backing Helen Clark and talk of some kind of informal alliance with the Mana Party. We'll talk about that a bit. We might talk about some Saudi sheep. We might talk about some steel. We might even talk about a bit about David Bain. But let's start. We won't dwell on the unitary plan, because interested readers might like to have a look on the Spinoff website. There's a special unitary plan podcast under the War for Auckland heading. Here in the Spinoff office, there's a lot of war paint and commando roles and generals standing to attention as we embark on our battle for the young people of Auckland.
I really preferred the malapropism of a prominent left-wing blogger, the Spinoff's War on Auckland.
I
felt very void.
I made that mistake from time to time too, I have to confess. No, but that's interesting. That prominent left-wing blog lord has been tying himself in knots. It's a difficult time for many of us. It's challenging. But actually, I should also say just that Jose Barbosa, who the hardest working man in Auckland, has written an introduction to all the podcasts that you can listen to on the Spinoff. What's it called, Jose, so people can search it?
I've completely forgotten. The Spinoff Guide to Podcasts.
Yeah, it's called the Spinoff Guide to Podcasts. So if you sort of search...
Sensible.
If you choose your favourite internet search engine and put in Spinoff Guide to Introduction to Podcasts, you'll probably find it. There's a bunch of other things. Alex Casey's On the Rag is even better than this podcast. There's some cool ones that Naomi Arnold did. But we're here to talk about politics, the unitary plan. Gosh, a lot of ink has been spilled on it. Does anyone have... what are your responses, friends, to the unitary plan?
It's interesting. You see these kind of dried up, shriveled husks walking through Mount Eden, and when you cut them, they appear to bleed outraged editorials and interviews with Bernard Orsman, who I guess we should probably clear up that the unitary plan does not, as seems to be widely reported in the Herald, require people in suburbs to raise their homes and build shoebox apartments.
Wake up
for
in the morning and see the bulldozers lined up, ready to pile in. No.
It's I mean, part of it shows, you know, that maybe we are closer to being rational economic actors than, you know, the new economics movement or economics, psychology sort of suggests. But because these people, when presented with higher property values for intensification, seem to feel they have no option but to replace their current residences. Yeah, it's
Annabelle, your take on the unitary plan. Have you managed to get through all of it yet?
Oh, I've read the whole thing.
Good.
Yeah, twice.
1.5 million words. Mm-hmm. Have you also read the Chilcot report?
Twice.
Good.
I don't even know what that is.
You've been on hold to Paula Bennett for a while now, right?
Obviously, it was something that the council was compelled to do by the government. Is it going to make a difference in terms of the housing crisis, I think is the big question. I think until the government steps in and takes some responsibility for things like immigration, that probably for people sleeping in their cars and staying at Te Puia Marae, it won't. It's all good to have development in houses being built en masse, but unless those houses are being ring-fenced for first home buyers or social housing, then they're just going to get snapped up by speculators and we'll be left in the same position. So not sure how much of a difference it's going to make in terms of providing homes for the people who most need it.
Well, it's going to make building more homes easier, both within the city limits and on the outskirts of town.
But will it make them more affordable?
Well, by building more homes, you actually make all of them more affordable. I think there's this artificial distinction drawn between affordable homes, which are sort of seen as kind of cheaper, and the existing housing stock. You know, when we talk about unaffordable Auckland homes, that's because, you know, South Auckland homes, you know, that used to be kind of $300,000 6 years ago are now sort of in the $500,000, $600,000 range, right? And that's because there's a lack of supply. So if you actually build more expensive homes, then you give more options to people at the top of the market, and they're not actually outbidding people in the middle and the bottom of the market. So just increasing the supply at whatever kind of stage of it actually does improve affordability. But one thing that the unitary plan and the whole housing affordability stoosh has shown up is just how susceptible we are to PR messaging, which I mean is probably good news for firms like Exceltium, but you know, for the last, since 2007, if you read John Key's fulminating speech about housing affordability back then, condemning the Clark government for not doing enough, politicians have been saying we need more affordable houses. We want to improve housing affordability. Matitia Tude says the exact same thing, but says it, you know, in the way that it actually is, goes on Radio New Zealand and says we would like to see house values drop. Now, it's the exact same message, but instead of being greeted with sort of warmth and a receptive audience, she was just about kind of dragged out of town and thrown in a swamp.
It was an amazing interview, that one with Guy and Esper on Morning Report, in which she said that the house prices should come down by 40-50%. And it was kind of, Jose, it's good to hear you're playing that background CD with the building noises on it. That's very apposite. And yet, and she's right, but can you honestly say you would ever advise a politician to say that they actively want to see house prices drop?
You wouldn't, but that's actually the flip side of what people are talking about. Yeah. When people say that we're going to increase housing affordability through increasing supply, what they mean is we're bringing down the value of houses. Yeah. Now, of course, the government has no intention of actually trying to bring down the value of houses. And when we get into these questions, kind of probing politicians saying, what, do you really want to see house prices fall by 40%, 30%, 20%, whatever? That's completely arbitrary. There's no way a politician can actually sort of say, we're going to reduce house prices by 10%. What they can do is say, we're going to increase supply, we're going to lessen demand through immigration controls.
They're not saying that, are they?
But yeah, what happens is that you actually get people like Matiria who are in a way punished for being honest. Meanwhile, the government makes noises about affordability, but I think we've really seen. I mean, during the recess, their big housing announcement was that they're going to make more money available to first homeowners through KiwiSaver subsidies, which will just have the effect of bumping up prices further. So I mean, the
affordability requirements that were in the unitary plan as notified, which was something like 10% of all developments of more than 15 dwellings should be in the affordable category, were chucked out by the panel along with various other things in their attempt to, as they say, pare it down on the advice of MB, i.e. on the advice of the government. So what you talk about, Ben, about the idea that the affordability will come when the market becomes more saturated, which is true, and that's fine, but that's 30 years. That's a long time to live in a car.
I think you're looking, with people who are living in a car right now, I don't think that's because, their deposit is sort of a few grand short. That's where social housing and government provision of accommodation has to come in.
And is that in the unitary plan? Is the council compelled to build social housing?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think that. I think in the plan itself, they've decided to remove most of that. Let's not talk about the unitary plan anymore because there's a lot more that you can read on that if you go to the War on Auckland site. You can also watch Shamabeel Ikab call bullshit on various things. He's out there with a sort of bullshit divining rod, identifying things that need to be put in front of the public and have bullshit shouted at them. Let's meanwhile move on to the kind of biggest immediate political story of the week, Annabelle, I guess, which is maybe you can explain it to us. It involves Marama Fox and the Māori Party and Helen Clark's bid for the Secretary General role at the United Nations.
That's right. So Marama Fox has come out and said that the Māori Party doesn't support Helen Clark's bid to become Secretary General of the UN. Obviously, there's bad blood between Clark and the Māori Party, which, over the foreshore and seabed legislation, which led to the establishment of the Māori Party. What's kind of surprising about this, though, is about 4 months ago, the Ururoa Flavel did speak in support of Helen Clark. And the other interesting factor is that when Helen Clark went to the UN and had her pōwhiri there, she was escorted by Tuku Roirangi Morgan, the president of the Māori Party, who spoke very highly of her there. So I think while there's no surprises that, that Marama has taken this stance, it kind of shows that, again, the Māori Party is a little bit... It just looks odd when the president is supporting her, a couple of months ago Te Ururoa was, and now they're making a big... And Tariana Turia,
the founding leader of the Māori Party, has spoken in support of Helen Clark as well.
She has. And I think as a party that prides itself on pragmatism and being at the table, and in the face of global warming and, Pacific Island atolls, at risk of climate change, it would be great to have someone from the Pacific region in that role. So, from that perspective, it makes sense for Helen Clark to be there. At the same time, Helen Clark voted against the Indigenous Declaration, what's the wording for it?
United Nations Declaration
for Indigenous
People, which Peter Sharples, Sir Dr. Peter Sharples, I think, confirmed in New York. Was that 2010 maybe?
That's right, and she was the Prime Minister during the Tūhoi raids where, Annette King described the children of Tūhoi who were held at gunpoint as collateral damage. So, she probably should have done a bit of homework before she applied for that job, and maybe tendered some apologies to those communities who are rightly still really upset. Tamati Kruger has come out in support of Marama's criticism of Helen Clark, and it's unfortunate. It's not a good look for her, but she probably should have done a little bit more to try and mend some of those bridges that she blew up so spectacularly.
What about the response, though? I've been slightly staggered by the number of times that I've heard it. I mean, the political utu has been mentioned. There's that. Treachery and treason. Everyone's saying treachery and treason, and that seems a little bit over the top.
Well, it's all it's interesting. I think there comes a time when we have to admit we haven't all read the Luminaries, and we're not all for Helen Clark for SG. I mean, this kind of New Zealand Inc. Red Sox kind of approach to Clark's UN Secretary General, but obviously she's not the same kind of sort of lunatic that Kevin Rudd is, which disqualified him from Australian support. But there are real problems with her record, and one of those problems is that in the infinite trade-offs that you always have to make in politics, under Clark it often ended up Māori being traded off. And what I found particularly interesting was that Dover Samuels, who Clark pretty ruthlessly disposed of within the first few months of her government as a minister over allegations that were eventually unsubstantiated, has come out and said that the Māori Party is extracting political utu. At the same time, I think they're justified. Annabelle mentioned Tamati Kruger, who I think is one of the greatest statesmen who's been produced in New Zealand in the last century, and he said, Helen Clark would be a greater person if she had acknowledged these mistakes.
Yes.
It just seems to me, Annabelle, a little bit ridiculous to pick up what Ben was saying, that we can't have people with different opinions on something like this because we all must band together. It's like it's like it's a sporting event where everyone must, and the idea that there's any dissent is somehow kind of
it's particularly ironic when it's journalists that are that are saying that sort of thing, because as journalists you're supposed to support the idea of robust debate and a competition of ideas and all of that. Those sorts of ideals. So to have journalists saying it's treason and so on and so forth seemed a little bit alarmist and emotive to me. It would be obviously a great thing for New Zealand and our Pacific Island neighbours to have Clark in there. Unfortunately, she may have ankle-tapped herself, and really she only has herself to blame for that. I'm sure had she gone to Tamati Kruger, had she tried to make amends with Tūhoe, they would have, they're a forgiving people, they would have accepted that. If she had perhaps looked back and said, I probably could have handled the foreshore and seabed issue better. I accept I made some mistakes, and I'm open to having a conversation about that. I think people would have been a lot more ready to accept and forgive and support her, but the fact that she remains bloody minded in her in her approach towards those issues, I think has come back to haunt her.
I mean, I think we can all agree that the main problem with this whole episode has been that it has distracted attention from taking the piss out of Kevin Rudd, which has been the most entertaining part of the whole battle so far. Which Helen Clark gets. I mean, is Helen Clark going to win? Anyone? She sort of got how many?
I think we suffer from a bit of Stephen Adams syndrome when it comes to
Stephen Adams, the basketball player.
Yeah, the basketball player. When we sort of
think he's the best NBA.
Yeah, we tend to think, oh, look, he's really established himself as one of the premier players in the NBA. Clark gets sort of kind of mentioned approvingly in papers like The Economist, but she hasn't really been reported as a front runner in the first.
You're
round
a fucking traitor, Ben Thomas. Stop this. This is just got to stop. Outrageous.
It reminded me, nobody would approve more of the treason designation than Clark herself. She always had a bit of a Louis XIV sort of vibe. The Prime Minister by definition cannot leak, And,
I watched the Al Jazeera debate, and I started off cheering for Helen because, that's what New Zealanders do. But I have to say, I swap camps.
To
The
Portuguese, Guterres.
Is she Portuguese?
The Brazilian.
The Costa Rican.
Oh, the Costa Rican.
What's her name? She was impressive.
Yeah, she was what's her name? She was with an F, something like that.
Something like that.
Use your computers, everyone, and look up the name and just send us a text. That'd help. In other Māori Party news from the longest political recess in the history of New Zealand politics, we have talk of a détente between the Māori Party and the Mana Party, Annabelle, which has been sort of brokered or at least kind of expounded by Māori Party President Tuku Morgan.
Yep, Tuku and Hone have had a little hongi, little hariru,
but they're not
little afi.
They're, I think a proper kind of proper coming together, a proper reunification has been rule out. Is that right?
Well, he went up north like within days of being elected president and went and had a hui with Hone, and literally within hours of the meeting, the Māori Party let go a press release saying there was no appetite for any sort of official arrangement with mana and Māori. I think really it's just about shoring up waiariki for Te Ururoa, and possibly doing some sort of electorate deal on, who stands where. But it's kind of ironic because Tuku came in and he was, immediately he said that he wants to win all the Māori seats back from the Labour Party. In Te Tai Tokiro last time, Hone only lost by, I think it was 700-800. And but at the last minute, the Māori Party started encouraging their supporters to vote for Kelvin. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things play out with Tuku Roirangi over the next few months. He's a guy who can get things done. As Ben has said to me before, he's an establishment figure. When things got tough with Tūhoro Nuku and Te Kotahitanga, the government sent in Tuku to try and broker a peace deal between them. But, the Māori Party has a lot of big personalities. Hone Harawira has a giant personality of his own. So to see whether or not they can keep it all together until the election will be interesting.
If they did, Ben, if they did reach some arrangement where they said, let's stand an either or, and maybe you got Annette Sykes and involved, or I mean, is it possible that they could? It'd be bad for Labour, wouldn't it, if that happened? You could see.
Yeah, that's right.
4 or 5 seats go to one or the other.
Yeah, look, it's going to be hard to dislodge Labour. Kelvin Davis has done a great job as an MP. Really
Although
high
he
profile.
may be a victim of his own success, because if they run the 2 MPs for one argument up there,
you mean put him high on the list?
Yeah, because he's been given a promotion. He's done a great job.
Yeah.
He'll definitely get in on the list. So there if Hone runs that line up north, they're quite astute voters up there. They have the highest Māori voter turnout in any of the Māori electorate. So it may get interesting.
Well, Kelvin could be a victim of the. I hate the phrase, but it became popularly referred to the man ban in Labour. This sort of this bid for 50-50 representation. When you go through because the majority of electorates are held by men for Labour, in order to get their caucus to sort of 50-50 men and women MPs after the election, they're actually going to have probably about the first sort of 7 or 8 people on their list will need to be women, which counts against Kelvin in that sense, and is why the newly retired from his electorate Trevor Mallard is going to have a hard time coming back on the list. But
unless you announce that speakers are gender neutral.
I think Trev's a bit too red-blooded old Labour to abide by that. But yeah, it absolutely makes sense. There's no reason for the Māori Party, which has no chance of winning in Te Tai Tokiro, to put its resources into that kind of fight. And similarly, it advantages them to shore up their co-leader Tuarara Flavel and Waiariki. One thing that might be interesting is that Tuku is an establishment figure. He's always got his cell phone on. He's very well known, and part of the challenge. You don't necessarily want a party president who has a higher profile than your leader. And so I think they've got to be very clear to ensure that Tuaroa and Marama Fox are still the faces of the Māori Party in public.
He's always got his cell phone on.
The other thing that will be interesting too is that the more seats that the Māori Party wins, electorate seats, the more it kind of puts Marama at risk, really, doesn't it? Because she got in on the list. So, you know, if they did a deal and they won, the Māori Party won Te Tai Hauauru off Adrian Dudawhi, you know,
you wouldn't get a top up.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where they put her, and if they try and cut a deal in Ikaroa Rāwhiti, where you would think she'd be a natural fit because that's her rohe kind of thing. But it doesn't look like Mecca's going anywhere, and Labour have never lost Ikaroa Rāwhiti, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Let's cast our view around the globe at sort of a couple of kind of general trade-ish related issues. First being the steel thing, which has sort of bubbled away for the last couple of weeks, I suppose, after it was splashed on the Sunday Star Times, which involves, it turns out, Zespri, which is the silly name given to kiwifruit branded overseas. Turns out that someone was given a warning that there could be some retaliation if an investigation into steel dumping by Chinese in New Zealand is pursued. And it all ended up being a bit embarrassing for Todd McClay, didn't it, Ben, who was forced in the end to put a line that no minister wants to put into a press release saying, "I apologise to the Prime Minister."
Yeah. It's kind of the circumstances are a bit murky around this, as they always are with trade. So there were allegations that the Chinese government were threatening non-tariff sanctions on New Zealand goods, perhaps kiwi fruit, and that these threats had been made through intermediaries to Zespri over in China, and the New Zealand government, was trying to avert this threat or wasn't on top of it. And then Todd McClay said there's no substance to this. Then it was revealed that actually there had been communications between MFAT and Zespri about the sort of heads up they had received, whatever the substance of it, and that McClay hadn't, had sort of forgotten. Leaving the Prime Minister out sort of on his own. This isn't the first even recent occurrence of ministers sort of leading the Prime Minister astray and leading him to misspeak. Paula Bennett, as you'll recall, did the same thing over the Ministry of Social Development and the Salvation Army, supposedly individually
flying squads.
The flying squads, knocking on every parked car in Auckland and embarrassing entangled teens, trying to force them into temporary accommodation.
And it was all not true.
And it was all a misunderstanding or a lie, depending on how you look at these things.
But in this case, it seemed like there wasn't, or at least the position for the Prime Minister is that he wasn't informed. I think his trade person in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet knew too, but it wasn't considered important enough to pass up the chain.
Yeah, and look, and that's probably true.
That sounds plausible. You used to work in that mess.
Yeah, look, there's a story today or yesterday about how kiwi fruit have been held up at the border because some fungal rot was found. Well, you can't argue with fungal rot. So whether that's connected or not, obviously people will connect the dots. But that may or may not be related.
There was that time, wasn't there? Was it during the botulism scan where there was some meat was held up on the border, and then everyone, what an interesting coincidence.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't want to
look. We have no way of knowing at this point. But yeah, what happens is, as soon as the Prime Minister, when the Prime Minister is getting ready for his Monday morning media with Mike Hosking and the TVNZ's charming breakfast crew and that kind of thing, ready to shoot the shit, he'll need a briefing on everything that's happened over the weekend media-wise if he's likely to be asked about it. Now, if there's a coming trade war with China, obviously he's going to be... I think he was actually overseas when it broke, but at the same time,
he was in Indonesia.
Yeah, you would accept that he was briefed on that. So it is a bit of a failing by McClay.
Having to put,
if there was an emoji to sort of illustrate Todd McClay's week, it'd be the monkey with the hands over its eyes, looking a little bit embarrassed. That would
Can
be
this
his
be a
text.
regular?
Oh,
Can
do you
this
think
be a
he texts
regular
it?
segment? Annabelle Lee's politics and emojis.
Yeah.
This has got a bold future ahead of it. And then let's kind of. No, you got more to say on this?
Oh no.
You want to?
I was going to do a smooth segue.
You were going to segue. I was going to do the segue.
Okay, you could. Hey, look.
No, you do it, man. Do it.
No,
Just
no,
do
you
it.
go.
No, I'll go and get a cup of tea.
Okay. I mean, if you, but you know, when you talk about sort of misleading the Prime Minister, really, you know, Todd McClay, you know, is sort of small fry in this. Paula Bennett's one of the sort of, you know, she's middle range, but you know, the king of this is Murray McCully. So. Casting our eyes back to another sort of tortured overseas, you know, foreign relations maze, the Saudi sheep deal, the agri hub in the desert, promoting New Zealand sheep to the world, which seems to involve a lot of sheep carcasses and security guards, forcing out journalists and calling the police to confiscate their film. New Zealand has been trying to negotiate a fair trade agreement with a free trade agreement with Saudi Arabia for quite a while. This seemed to hit the skids because of the live sheep export issue. There's differing opinions on whether that could have just been carved out and dealt with later. And then a millionaire/billionaire in Saudi Arabia is reported to have held up that trade deal, and so the Foreign Affairs Minister Murray McCully sent his agent in, kind of like Heart of Darkness, into the Middle East to try and sort this out. Brokered an unorthodox deal to give this guy roughly around $11.5 million.
Innovative solution.
Yeah, well, and this was meant to sort of pave the way for a free trade agreement. Now, what happened is the sheep that were to be sent there as part of the $11.5 million reached the desert and promptly died, because that's what sheep do in deserts. It transpired that Murray McCully, in getting this rather unusual expenditure approved, had told
Innovative solution.
Yeah, had told his cabinet colleagues, in a cabinet paper that didn't have the appropriate cover sheet, which may seem like a sort of small kind of deal, but basically this seems to be something McCully just sort of knocked up without consulting with Treasury or any of the appropriate authorities, to kind of be checked or vetted, kind of chucked it on the middle of the table during cabinet and asked for approval, saying that New Zealand was facing a $20 to $30 million lawsuit from Hamid Al-Khalaf, the Saudi Arabian, but based on supposedly investments that he had made on the understanding that live sheep exports would be allowed by the government before they changed their mind. Now, there's no evidence of any legal action, and this week, Treasury documents released by Treasury showed that there was no legal cause of action. There's not even any evidence of a threat.
They haven't seen any of it. Treasury said they could find no evidence.
There's been nothing produced showing even a sort of cursory lawyer's letter or a cease and desist or an optimistic request for $11 million, let alone 20 or 30. And this is pretty typical of the way Murray McCully seems to operate, which is, and the press talk about this in glowing terms. They say, McCully, he's unorthodox. He takes shortcuts. He takes shortcuts kind of like our parents do, the shortcuts that end up taking about 4 times as long and driving down the wrong way of a one-way street. It's a pretty shabby affair.
Cruel attack on older generations from the Spinoff HQ.
Look, I mean,
completely unnecessary.
The best spin that can be put on this is that it was meant to be a bribe and it didn't work.
Annabelle, the Auditor General report into this matter, which has been underway for over a year now, I think is nearly there. Maybe even next week when Parliament resumes might turn up. Do you reckon that this could be the end for McCully if it ends up? I mean, if the Ben Thomas version of events ends up being roughly right, do you think that Key will give McCully the boot?
I would be very, very, very surprised if he did. I don't think so. Can I just say quickly, $11.5 million for an abattoir in Saudi Arabia can't afford $1.5 million for Pepe Pods for our babies that are dying in what the chief coroner describes as an epidemic of sudi for Māori babies. Fortunately, there's been a change of heart this week. One meeting, what a difference one meeting makes. All of a sudden, we can afford peppy pods, and thank goodness for that.
And on the subject of payouts and comparisons of payouts, we also had the David Bain money this week, which was $925,000, but don't call it compensation, and it's a kind of make it go away, squeaky wheel type, draw a line under it deal. Does that seem like a reasonable sum to you, Annabelle? How much did I say? 925,000. Yeah.
What it says to me is that the deal that Taina Porter got was not a good one, the $2 million, because if you can get nearly $1 million when you haven't proven yourself guilty and you haven't been in jail as long, then it doesn't seem very fair to be getting $2 million when you are most definitely innocent and you've been in jail longer.
Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? Whatever you think, everyone has an opinion on David Bain, whether or not he was guilty or innocent, but leaving that to one side, when you listen to Amy Adams talk about a pragmatic solution and a fair solution, you kind of think, well, hang on a minute, how come Taina Porter's sum wasn't adjusted for inflation?
Yeah. Well, I understand that they've cut a deal for Taina where he gets to accept the amount that he's been offered while continuing to ask for more, which I think is a good and fair thing, but he definitely should be getting more.
And I think that's right. I agree with that. I think it's the government could have held out on that as a disincentive to challenge it, but to their credit, they did say, all right, we'll kind of.
That was an honourable thing to do, and it's about time someone did something honourable for Taina.
Bank a sum in sale of the century or whatever, like you've got that now guaranteed, but now you can.
Double or nothing.
Amy Adams said it, it's a tough decision because, this has already been through 3 reviews by retired High Court judges, from here in Canada. There was obviously no end to the Bain camp's appetite for litigation on this. They were just going to keep going, they're basically sort of like men possessed. And sometimes, there are cases like this, the Berrymans were one, this sort of family who were charged for a bridge collapse on their property and spent the sort of next 15 years of their lives kind of pursuing this grievance. And sometimes it's just sort of considered the humane thing to do and practical from a government point of view in terms of the amount of hours and time you'll spend defending these things in court. I think a lot of people feel uneasy that Bain got anything, but I think Amy Adams probably made the right decision.
How many jumpers do you think $925,000 can get you, Toby?
Well, it depends. I mean, that's an interesting question, but it really depends whether or not they're home knits or whether you're talking about op shops or,
True.
I mean, it's an impossible question to answer unless you specify what type of jumpers. And on that note, I think it's probably a good time to wind things up. Annabelle, Ben, thank you enormously. Thank you very much, Jose Barbosa. Thank you also to friends and sponsors at the Spinoff, Lightbox, Big Pipe, Unity Books and Barkers. We'll be back soon with another hard-hitting, sizzling, Gone by Lunchtime. I'm Toby Manhire. Thank you very much. I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spinoff or wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at the Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.